If there's time to smoke, we're going broke.
Do you have a better quality of life being a career employee or a freelancer forever?
How soggy do you like your cereal? And what does that have to do with quality of life? Stick around to the end to find out.
Is it better to die with more stuff or more experiences?
What good is it to work yourself to death if you never spend any time living?
Enable program deep sea diving. Untethered across the Moth. Lower PC roster. Visualizing season 6 of Kitchen Sick microscopy.
Alrighty. Welcome to another Kitchen Sink Microscopy. And my name is Casey Rochford. And you know that because you're already a subscriber, right? Well, if not, do that now. Like and share. Tell all your friends about it because it's super awesome. You will enjoy every minute of it.
And definitely leave comments down there. Share your thoughts. Keep the conversation going, as we always say. Casey and I, we write our own music, and it's available out there on the interwebs. And well, at the end of this particular episode, there will be a song of our creation, old or new. You never know. It's all over the place. So yeah, enjoy that. Stick around to the end for sure. So Casey, what do you want to talk about today?
um, Quality of life, and specifically is free time, is time off of work, like correlated with like the amount of quality of life that people in general feel that they have.
Ah, I mean, just specifically responding to that particular thing, I would say yeah. Because what's the point of life? I mean, we all have to do something to support ourselves, no matter
Mm-hmm.
if you're one person living on an island or if you live within an advanced city or something like that. There's always something we have to do, be it for our own benefit or to contribute to the group uh, society that you live in. Um, but I think too often people don't take enough time off. Basically, become obsessed, or maybe the job becomes all you are, and I
Well,
don't think that's
yeah,
healthy.
yeah, and in the U.S. In particular, you kind of can't take time off, at least not as much as you need, um, and certainly not as much as you want. But as far as like countries all over the world, like the US is, I think, the only one that doesn't have any mandated time off whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
Like every other country, the government is like, oh, you should give at least 2 or 3 weeks, or you know, sometimes more, but pretty much never less than like twice what what people in America
Well,
tend to get,
I,
like generously from their employer.
I don't I almost think that that's not necessarily just a like a government thing. I think it's a cultural thing in the US. People like how many people or maybe you're one of these people, you come into work sick. Like you have sick time, but
Mm-hmm.
choose not to take it. And you come in sick, obviously risking infecting other people and just not really being as productive as you could be because you're
Right.
feeling like ass. It's a cultural thing. Like in the US, people don't it's like you almost lose face if you take time off, and I'm sure
Yeah.
that's not we're not alone in that. I'm sure Japan at the very least is very, very parallel to the US.
that sentiment is definitely like a part of work culture, and
Mhm.
it's not a good
No,
part at all.
I,
But it is definitely like more of a problem in the U.S. because at least on the federal level, there's no mandate for sick days. And Washington State, I forget what year, but not that long ago, finally put in like sick leave for at least businesses of a certain size or more. And even then, like I've had employers where they found the loophole and they're like, so instead of vacation and sick leave, we have paid time off. And they just lump it all together. So you have to use your vacation essentially to be sick.
well,
Um,
and that's that. I mean, that's like a bureaucratic angle of things. But I'm just thinking, like, culturally in the U.S., a lot of
well, that,
people don't they don't want to take time off.
well, where's that culture come from, though? Is the question. Like, it's
Well,
certainly not like inherent. It comes from the necessity to keep their job. Like, it's not like they want to not work all
well,
the
but
time.
here's the thing: is that no, it's a chicken and egg thing. My point, like earlier on, is that there are people with a shit ton of sick time available. They easily could take time off. They simply don't. They're sick. They come into work. They just had surgery. They come into work. It's like you almost have to. It's a presentation sort of thing. You
Yeah.
got to be the man, right, or something. And that's I mean, the obviously, a discussion with me about that. I don't believe in government anything, but I think that it is it's important, and companies know this, by the way,
Yeah.
that for productivity you have to have downtime. Like, you have to pace yourself, not just during the day. That's why there's breaks and things like that. And it's
Mm-hmm.
like, it's not just there because government says so. It's because if people don't pace themselves, they're going to get burned out and they're going to leave. And well, that's a bad thing, from a company standpoint and from an employee standpoint, that kind of
Yeah.
thing. But
You would think that's intuitive to companies, but like
well, a lot
it's
of them,
actually like a great example of like how this should be working, but it's not working, and that because there are no government mandates for time off, you'd think there would be some companies being like, hey, we're going to offer you like 6 weeks a year, and they would totally get like all the people to come work for them and
no,
get the most
there are
productivity. And
there are definitely companies like that, and there's companies that have uh like fun rooms and stuff in their
mm,
offices, like games and pool tables and free sodas and snacks and stuff like that. I mean, that's a very common thing. And well, but it is a cultural thing, because there's this sort of mentality, from an employee. There's a tier that's employee based, that where it's culture, and then there's another tier that's like the I guess the CEO slash manager level. If there's time to lean, there's time to clean, that kind of thing,
yeah,
which is just bullshit. We all know it's bullshit.
yeah,
That you get more out of people when they have more leisure time, and that's just within the day. But in terms of like throughout the year, or longer time periods, it's really, really important to have that downtime.
oh yeah,
It does actually make you more productive as an employee. And I mean, you have a more fulfilling life too. Um, Slowly that's changing. That's being recognized, at least in the US. Um,
yeah. There's definitely like some shift in work culture going on. Like I'll jump on LinkedIn every now and then and see all these like LinkedIn memes, which are always like work based things.
hmm,
And like the other day I saw one where there was some employer basically saying like, I don't want to hear anymore about like, oh, I gotta go take care of my sick kid, or I'll be back as soon as I can. I just gotta run these errands and stuff. So it's like, just I trust you to get your job done. You do whatever you need to do. You don't have to like get permission or feel bad about having to live your own life, and that's healthy. Like
Mhm.
that's definitely not like the overall majority work culture in the world, I would say.
Mhm. Yeah.
But
I,
especially in the US, like the US is very like all about that grind,
mhm.
and it's a depressing kind of existence to feel like the only reason you're alive is to work for somebody else
I,
just so
I
that you can afford the roof over your head.
I think that might have kind of the seeds of that culture were planted during the Industrial Revolution,
Yeah.
um, when production capacity exponentially increased.
Mm-hmm.
And not only that, but the ability to earn more exponentially increased. So it's like, well, you know, I'm just gonna keep working because I make more. The more I work, the more money I make. Um, and I don't know that that's healthy. I'd say that's not. And do you really want to be? What do you want on your tombstone? Essentially,
Mm-hmm.
do you want to be remembered as Employee of the Year or for some other?
Pepperoni.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
wrong tombstone.
yeah. uh, but I think it's interesting because like, yeah, I think time off, leisure time, time to yourself, time to appreciate the things that you've been able to purchase or whatever, the wealth that you've generated. Like, it's important to be able to just kind of sit back and appreciate that at least a little bit,
Mm.
and not for just like a day, but for like I always say, it's not a proper vacation if I don't come back to work and it feels like if I come back to work and it feels like a totally foreign place and I don't know my password to log into the computer, that's a good vacation. Like, I've
Yeah.
taken enough vacation at that point.
Yep.
Like, if it feels
I
like
I first experienced that like when I was taking trips to Germany in the beginning. Like I came back and I was like, oh shit, I forgot my password. I wasn't even gone that long, like a week or something.
mm,
But it's all about like the quality of the time off, and um, yeah, just having the ability to truly relax, or disconnect, or whatever it is you need to do to
disconnecting,
recharge your
that
batteries.
that's that that's the key, is being able to like walk away. Now, there are a lot of people who have jobs that they absolutely love,
Yeah.
and like me, my job, I enjoy it. It's pretty fun and fulfilling, challenging, um, and so I don't mind jumping in when I'm taking time off because it isn't really like a chore to me. But I could see how it could be for a lot of people, like all
Mm-hmm.
the emails coming in and you're worrying all the time. Like, I think that's okay. I guess this kind of relates to what just popped into my head early on when we started recording. Um, in the US, summer break from school,
Uh-huh.
it's from like June to September. Like, mid June, you're off until sometime in September, depending on where you are. Um, and I remember it felt like it was like you felt like there was so much time and not a care in the world, because it's like, man, there are months. I've got
Mm-hmm.
all kinds of time. I don't have to worry about a single thing. And then, of course, back to school, you got to get your pencils and trapper keepers and stuff like that. And then that
Yeah.
feeling of dread sets in of like,
Right.
oh man. But at least like having that duration where like you can kind of forget about everything and lose yourself to
Yeah.
whatever. That's really, really important for
Yeah, and it's funny that the
psychological health.
US is like hanging on to that in school, when often the rest of the world is all like, why are you taking so much time off? You like forget everything. That's crazy. Yet when it comes to the work culture, it's completely the opposite of America's school culture.
Which
So
is
that's,
really weird, isn't it? Like, don't you
yeah,
think that's strange? Why wouldn't it
like
be the
how
same across
you're
the
not
board?
really preparing people for the real world that they're more than likely going to spend the rest of their life in, when you're all like, here's a long break for your mental health and blah blah blah, and then just kidding, for the rest of your life you're going
Psych.
to be working.
Yeah, well, now you don't necessarily have to. Obviously, if you run your own show, you can kind of dictate um, how you want to do that, depending on what you do.
Yes and
Um,
no. Like, you're also at the beck and call of customers. So
it,
I do see that happen here in Germany. Like, where businesses will like close down for weeks at a time and be like, hey, we're on vacation. Like a restaurant just shuts down,
mhm.
and it's totally fine. Like, they just put a sign on the window and come back 6 weeks later. Nobody bats an eye. If you do that in America, you're swallowed. Like, in that amount of time, an entrepreneur can come along and say, hey, I'll open a place right down the street from here in the next couple of weeks, and totally get all their clientele, and then they could
Yeah,
completely
but
wipe you off the map.
that's like retail, and that's only when you're the
Mm-hmm.
only person working there.
Mm-hmm.
But you can, if you're, say, an independent contractor, a freelancer or something. um, I I've known plenty of people who took like a quarter of a year off doing taking vacations, because they would work really hard
Mm-hmm.
and do a bunch of projects or something like that, and make enough money that they could just take a bunch of leisure time and enjoy that time. Actually, I knew a guy who was a longshoreman, and he made so much money that he pretty much only worked. I think he worked for like half a year. No, it was like a quarter of a year. It was just like a few months. He worked really hard for a few months, getting all this overtime and all this stuff. And then he took the rest of the year off and was able to like buy
Yeah.
a house and start a family and all this stuff. It's like he hardly worked.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing with the like, well, we've seen like Deadliest Catch, right? Like the
Yep.
fishermen and stuff, and that's a seasonal thing, and you can make a ton of money in that
Oh yeah.
very short period of time. And yes, it's hard work and it's dangerous, but there's a lot of similar things like that. And maybe, I don't know. Sorry, my chair is falling apart, so I keep sliding off of it. Um, but that still comes down to culture, because it's like there are options. There's always options. There's always things you could do if you want that time. You just have to do them. And so often I see people who they're like fixated on a particular thing. Like, oh well, I know there's all these different jobs I could have that would give me everything I want, but I don't want to do them because that's not what I like to do. Like, well, think about it. If you're a singular person living on an island by yourself and you have to sustain yourself, well, there's a bunch of shit you probably don't want to do, but you kind of have to do. Like,
Yeah.
there's a lot of things. So suck it up and do the work you need to do, but try to be intelligent about it.
Yeah, that's the key. Like I would like to see a cultural paradigm shift from like glorifying the grind to work smart, not hard.
Yeah.
Like that being kind of the golden standard. Because like, honestly, like, what what is there to gain by expending every last drop of your energy for whatever it is you're doing? Like, there's only so much energy that needs to be put into certain things.
Mm-hmm.
Not everything needs to be 110%. In fact, like, most things probably shouldn't be.
Mm-hmm.
If you think about anything that's constantly operating at like full capacity, what's going to happen, right? Like, from an
Yeah.
engineering standpoint, that's all kinds of critical failure points, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, you never give something a chance to rest. It wears down, it breaks.
Mm-hmm.
um, and
And
that's
that's
physically and metaphorically.
and certainly from a company standpoint, you don't want that in your employees. You don't want them burning out, because the value of an employee is the ability to be like to basically have them operate autonomously. You can say, hey, you're a cashier, go ahead and sit there and cashier for the day.
Right,
Or
right,
you're a janitor, they just, you set them off and they walk around and clean things up as they need to be cleaned and stuff. They
yeah.
kind of self-operating. You don't want a bunch of people who are all, you don't want all your employees to be green. Like, what value is there in that?
Right.
So
I did a minute microscopy about like management at one point, and kind of made that argument like, if you have effective management, that shouldn't even be like a full-time permanent position. It should be more like, okay, we need an expert to come in and train the new people, and then they train them on how to do their jobs, and then they know how to do their jobs and they do them. You
yeah,
know, like,
well, like
and
that's where, in my job, the three people that I work with, my boss hardly ever interacts with us. We just kind of run our
yeah,
own show. Like, she doesn't micromanage, doesn't get up in our stuff, and every once in a while about certain things, but they're usually big things or like
mhm,
a project or something. But yeah, for the most part, we just take care of business, right? It's just like, oh, and that's sort of the culture that I've tried to cultivate, because I'm sort of the veteran there. So I put that in, like, pride in your work, take pride in your work, do a good job, and just take care of things, keep things running, right? That's all that matters. Just keep it running. And, it works out. Like, I have time where, well, I mean, because what I do is kind of like being a firefighter. There's a lot of downtime, so there's time to just chill. But when the fire happens, we move in and put it out very quickly and effectively, and that's, I don't understand. Well, I don't know. Like I was saying, a chicken and egg thing. Like, did this come from, where is the origin of this culture? Maybe it began with the beginning of the US, possibly.
well, I think you were right about the Industrial Revolution,
Yeah.
um, because that's where that's kind of like the birthplace of things like unions and stuff came from, was just the necessity, because there were like you said, uh, sweatshops and stuff like that in the US, kids working like crazy hours, no days off, things like that. All those things, like the concept of a weekend and all that stuff, comes from unions. Like, it trickled out into the non-union world, but that was
But didn't it
first established because of workers kind of
didn't it
coalescing and saying like, look, we need time off.
didn't it actually begin with like Henry Ford? I think, maybe.
I don't know, unless
Well,
he was like integral in unions, which
no,
doesn't
it
seem
wasn't.
right.
Like, he just on his own. This was no pressure from anybody. I believe. I think he's the origin of the 8-hour workday. Um, but so here's the thing. I kind of disagree. Oh God, there's a fly moving around here. That's annoying. Um, um, like, I don't think the Industrial Revolution actually, on its own, began to eliminate things like child labor and long work days and things like that, slowly but surely. Um, it like all of these technologies we've developed have allowed us to work much more efficiently. If you compare what a single human being can accomplish with tools today compared with 200 years ago, it's there's not even a comparison. Like,
Mm,
me with a single uh, machine, say like a loader backhoe sort of machine, I can dig more than 1,000 people could back in 200 years ago with their shovels and picks. Like, like we have, I don't know. It's actually provided us way more opportunity for leisure. It just, I don't know why.
But the culture isn't allowing us to reap the benefits of that.
Think about it though. The culture is us. Every one of us is a component of that culture. So why hasn't that changed? Like AI just on its own can absolutely eliminate the need to like tied in everything integrated and stuff like that. Like you might only have to work an hour a day, maybe one day a month or something. You get
see that's what done. I would love to see. I would really love to see that, like humanity reach a point where their brains made it possible for them to actually enjoy life. Like, why lust after some reward in the afterlife when we kind of have the capability? We actually do have the capability of creating kind of a paradise, a utopia on Earth. Like, when it comes to like how many people there are on the planet versus natural resources, stacking actual need against available resources, we do technically live in a post-scarce society. The only things that stop that are like, physical access, which is usually driven by economic access and things like that. All these false barriers that, maybe false is the wrong word, but like imaginary lines that we draw and say, well, we can't do that because of this, and that, whatever it is completely made up. Like it's not an actual need to survive.
Yeah. Oh man, well, that's a whole interesting angle there. I'd like to get into that again, but I just wanted to kind of come back to the culture. And I think so when you're a freelancer, you don't get paid by the hour. If you're a contractor, you may or may not get paid by the hour. You get paid by the job. Like when you've completed this, well, even people picking fruit on a farm or something, they don't get paid by the hour. They get paid by how many pieces they pick, right? How many baskets or bushels or whatever they deliver. So it's like in that, you can definitely grind really hard and get a whole lot of return and then have a bunch of time off. But people still have this mindset. It's like the W-2 employees where you're getting paid by the hour. I think that's almost kind of a stupid thing. Unless if you're in a position where your presence needs to exist, right? You're a cashier. You interact with people. Right. You have to, or you're, I don't know, security, right? You can't,
or you're part of a 24-hour operation or something. Like there's a constant need for things to be happening, and you just have to fill slots of time with people.
Yeah, but I'm thinking about positions that you can't not be there. 911 operator, right? You can't have nobody. Everybody's on vacation. Like, well, okay, what's the point of that? No, so those kinds of positions do require like an hourly sort of concept, but most don't. Almost like a whole lot of them don't.
Actually, things like that, 911 operators could actually take a page from the playbook of things like DoorDash, where it's all about like you just work whenever you want to, and you see jobs coming through, and depending on like how busy things are or how many other drivers are available, you might get paid more, incentivizing you to then take the job.
You're onto something there. So distributed systems like that, where it's sort of like there's these jobs where you can work for a call center, and so your number is in the pool, and depending, it'll randomly pick you. Now AI can definitely help with this, where it could get intelligent about who to pick and when. Um, but that makes sense, where you could almost on your off time be a 911 operator, right?
Yeah.
Like you take one call in the evening or something like that, and you get paid just to take a call, enter some stuff on a computer, boom, you're done. And yeah, like that.
No, I mean, stuff like that. There's obviously some training that has to go on. Like, you would, of course, have to like actually apply for jobs like that that have a certain level of importance and require you to remain cool under stress. And
Yes,
blah 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 and stuff
that's
like that.
that's kind of the extreme angle
Yeah,
of that.
yeah. But if more positions operated that way on a contractor basis, where with like piecemeal, choose your own hours kind of work,
Mm-hmm.
then people could actually just dip their toes in a lot of different things and be like, I want to try this
Mm-hmm.
and see if it's something I want to actually like spend my full time on and give all my passion to, or
Well,
maybe
yeah,
just
actually, so
once in a while.
I have an anecdotal story about that. So my very first like real job was at a computer shop, and I was a W-2 employee getting paid by the hour. For a couple of years, I worked there, and then I decided I wanted to do other stuff. So I've decided I wanted to do other stuff many, many times. So I went on to do other things for a couple more years, a few more years, and then decided, well, okay, this particular job, I'm not cool with that anymore. So I left it, and I walked into the same computer shop, and for old time's sake, and we're sitting there talking, and they were talking about how like, oh, it'd be really, we need more people. And I'm like, well, I don't really want to come back and work full time. So maybe I can come back as a contractor. So I came back, and I worked there for a couple of years, like 2 years, as a 1099 employee doing
Mhm.
contract, which was awesome because I had no hours. They
Yeah.
couldn't get up in my face over, oh, you didn't show up. It's like, no, they would just call me and be like, oh yeah, there's like 2 repairs to do over here and there and stuff. So I'd come in whenever and take care of those things. And the crazy thing, like, even though my actual work hours were a fraction of what they were before, I made way more money. Like overall, not just per
Yeah.
hour, but overall. Because they would just give me a cut of every single job. So I'm like,
Right.
oh yeah, every ticket I do, I get 15% or whatever. And it was great. Like, oh my God, well, and of course I loved the people that I worked with there. So most of the time I just hang out even without getting paid, because why
I
not?
thought it was funny that we went on to open a business. It was more or less like based off of that place. And the guy that started that business ended up contracting for us.
Yeah. I know, it's pretty amazing. Yeah. Yeah,
Full circle.
I know, man. Jeez.
But no, that is good. Like, not only does that, like, encourage people to get work done quickly and efficiently, but also, if done right, like if you're not billing the company like way too much money for your time, um, it can actually be mutually beneficial in a monetary sense, because they're not having to pay you for sitting around and doing nothing
Yep.
in the slow times.
That's
But
where if there's time to lean, there's time to clean thing comes in.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
But yeah, because it's a calculable thing from the company's standpoint. It's like, oh, we know it's going to cost us this much per ticket for this employee to do that thing. And as an employee, hey, every single time I go out and do one of these things, I'm going to get this much money. Like that's easy math.
Yeah.
And that's really good. And having that freedom of choosing when you want to work, God, there's nothing like it. Like it takes such a load off of you. And like, hey, this is what's cool too. Okay, This is what's awesome about freelancing and 1099 contracting kind of stuff. Like at a regular hourly job, if you have some unforeseen expense come up or you come up short for a big bill, like say rent is due and oopsie, I don't have enough money, well, you're fucked. You work these number of hours and that's that. And they really don't like you working more than that.
Yeah.
But if you're a contractor, well, you take on more jobs. But oh, okay, well, I guess it's gonna suck for a few days. I'm gonna have to be working like 15-hour days, but at least I'll be able to pay rent or whatever. Pay for the repair of my car or something, new transmission or whatever, medical bills or something. Like you could just choose to do more in that short period of time, and yeah, that's awesome. And if you're ahead too, let's say you're like that longshoreman friend of mine, like you're way ahead. You basically have a year's worth of money. Like, you know what? I'm going to take the next 7 months off and just fuck off and play video games. You totally can, or maybe you're like, hey, I want to buy a house. So you work 3 or 4 more months really, really hard. And all of a sudden, boom, bam, $400,000 right there in the bank. Like that. There's a book I have. So this is, I guess, my recommendation. It's been a long time since I've read it, and I don't remember who wrote it, but it's a book called Freelance Forever, and it's basically all about how to be a freelancer. Which that right there is the cultural paradigm shift that I think the U.S. needs.
Mm-hmm.
The concept of freelancing, and I see it. Oh, government. Like,
yeah, I mean, like I was going to say, it's not without stress because mainly tax difficulties, but also like, depending on how much money you need and what it is you're freelancing for, it can be a stress to find enough work sometimes to fill that need. But
yeah, but you could diversify.
It really just depends on the situation and the person too. So
yeah, if you live in like a small town that has a population of 1,000, you're not going to make much on doing Uber driving,
right?
But if you live in like New York City, well, yeah, an 8-hour day could pay a ton of money.
Yeah,
you could make a ton. And this is where I was saying about government is now there's this kind of push to basically make contractors be like treated the same as W-2 employees. Oh, you got to get hourly pay, all this stuff. And a lot of people who do that work are a little frustrated with that because it's like, oh, what? So now I can't work just a few hours a day in my off time. Like maybe they have like a regular job and they work on weekends, making a little bit of extra money. No, now all of a sudden you're basically an employee, like a W-2 employee. And
I bet that comes from lobbying. I bet anything.
Yeah,
because there's the only people standing to gain from that are number one, the government for getting taxed, but also two, the lobbyists themselves, the corporations being like, you know what, these freelancers charge a lot of money. We could get way more bang for our buck with hourly work.
Well, in the case of the likes of Uber and Lyft and stuff, the lobbying comes from taxi companies. Yeah,
yep,
they don't like that competition because it's way cheaper to get an Uber than a taxi in some places. And yeah,
sometimes it's more expensive.
It can be.
I've definitely gone with taxis quite often just because like there is the competition and they do come up cheaper sometimes.
This is true. And that's where it's nice having a variety of options because it does depend on the time and where you are and the circumstances and stuff like that. But it just being a freelancer is so liberating. Like it's terrifying it's like starting a business. Like when we started a business, it's like, well, we're not getting a paycheck for probably who knows, a year, 2 years or something. I think that's about how long it took until we could like actually pay ourselves something substantial. um but it was cool because it was our work. We were making that happen, and that was the driving force. It's like it's something special. And so even okay, so even if you have to work a lot, if it's if it's your thing,
Mhm.
even so, because essentially we were contractors, we were contracting to the general public. It was a retail sort of job, um, but the customers were our bosses.
Yeah.
And so, but even then, like you still have a lot of fulfillment in this thing that you birthed growing up and turning into something huge. I mean, I every time I drive around Tacoma, I see our clients,
Hmm.
like businesses or whatever. That it's like, oh yeah, yeah, they were our customer, and that's really cool. It's like, man, we built that. What do we have? Like $500 a piece to start the business.
I think
Yeah, I think
was it 1,000 total
it
that we
was a
put in?
total of $1,000 that we started that. And
Yeah.
I remember my girlfriend at the time, she's like, oh no, that's a stupid idea. Oh man, what a waste. Like nobody repairs printers anymore. It's all leased and stuff. And the funniest thing, and it was like oh man, it was so satisfying, is we had been, her company called us
Yeah.
to repair a printer. Like, man, that was so, oh, just like, that's worth it. That's worth all that work.
Yep.
Eh,
Yeah. Yeah. I definitely think there needs to be like a move toward, especially in this economy where like it's not like the 90s. It's not like where
yeah.
you could go apply for a job just for fun because you were bored on a Thursday or something. Like it's difficult to find work now. And even though there's plenty of work needed, they're making it increasingly more difficult to get these jobs and stuff. And it's because they're putting a lot at stake. You know, they want to vet people because they've got to provide all these health benefits and stuff like that. And so that is a good point to talk about. That is one of the major drawbacks to being a freelancer is that in the US, you don't have guaranteed health coverage. And that is a huge, huge, huge deal. And that's probably the only thing I would say makes it entirely stupid to be just working for yourself unless you make fat bank, like real fat bank.
You want to
Um,
make money, be a consultant. Just saying.
yeah, pretty much, yeah.
You probably don't even
Which
need
is the
to,
most jack off position
you
ever.
you could just make everything up as you go along, and yeah, you don't even need to know what you're talking about. I
Yeah,
know this from experience with consultants.
yeah,
Oh man, well, so that is definitely a consideration, which I do want to talk about. But there was oh shit, now I'm trying to remember what you were saying before talking about that.
yeah.
Um,
That kind of became a red herring because it is kind of like a big deal. Like,
that is an episode in and of itself, honestly.
yeah, it is, but
Which we could make this a two-parter, I suppose. Like come back to this one.
yeah.
Um, so, oh yeah, I was gonna say, I now I remember. Um, yeah, things are a lot more dynamic now because you were saying, oh, it's not like the 90s. Like things are more
Mhm.
dynamic, and job positions are a lot more unstable because things keep changing. Um, Companies are adapting to varying situations and stuff like that. Um, and so the idea that you could, in my father's generation, you could go fill out one piece of paper, an application, and have a factory job and work there until you retire, 50 years or something like that. You're working at this job, you work your way up, you know, raise a family, buy a house, that kind of thing. It's not like that anymore. Um, Even where I work, there's people leave, people are let go, positions disappear because things change. Um, like you can't rely on that. And
Yeah.
so the freelancing idea to me makes a lot of sense because you are the job. It's you build yourself a skill set that's indispensable, and you could pretty much work anywhere, especially if you have a broad variety of skills. Like I've worked in IT ish a lot, but I've also worked in industrial robotics. I've worked in construction, um, like lots of retail, uh,
Yeah.
that kind of
Well,
thing. And
yeah, I tell you, like the importance of having a broad skill set is incalculable.
yeah,
But it's also a cultural thing because I thought that would be a huge benefit here in Germany. It's actually quite the opposite. They prefer people who stick to one thing their
so
whole
like
lives.
so like politicians then.
Yeah. So, like, I wonder if I could craft a resume and say, like, here's my skill set, like come up with, a cover letter saying, here's what I can do for you based off of, all the different realms of experience that I've gained over the years and become an independent contractor, which is kind of also hard here.
Yeah,
But
yeah, I'd imagine.
but
Well,
if people did that more, like just create your own job, like go to a company, whether they have an opening or not, say, here's how I think I could benefit you and state your case.
mhm.
If people did that more, like you might actually find that, like sure, big corporations have budgets and, they can only do certain things with those budgets, blah, blah, blah. So they probably can't just make up a position, but most places could,
Well, but
you know?
here's the thing: they don't need to make a position. If you're a contractor,
Yeah.
it's kind of a win-win. Like
Mhm.
it's a win for the company because again, it's calculable. This task costs this much. It's sort of
Yeah.
like a price tag on a product in a store. There's no, well, okay, in the US there's sales tax and stuff like that in most places. But I mean, you're like, oh yeah, that widget costs that much. And but if you have to hire somebody, well, it's kind of infinite. You never know what the cost is going to be. Um, and
Yeah.
this is where I talking about like this cultural shift that needs to happen. I think companies need to push more in that direction. Obviously, you need hourly employees for like the front desk or the security people or whatever. There's got to be
Yeah.
people that are always there and they'll be hourly. But for the most part, a lot of stuff that happens could be task based where you get paid to do a particular thing. They're like, hey, we need all this data reconciled or something, or something. I combine these two data sets together, or build this thing, or fix that thing, or whatever. And it's great because it's temporary. You don't even have to apply. Like, they'll just be like, hey, it'd be a contract essentially. Well,
Mhm.
as the name contractor implies, um, they'll be like, hey, can you do this thing? You say, yep. And they're like, all right, well, how much is it going to cost? That much. Okay, sold. And boom, you do the thing, they pay you that much.
We
Like,
should actually make a movement out of this, like hashtag make your own job.
yeah.
Like build a resume catered to wherever you want to work, and go give it to that place. And you don't tell them what you want to make. You make them offer you money, give you a bid, and you go to all their competitors and you say the exact same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have the power to say how much you want to make at that point, because then it's a bidding war. Like, it's like, okay, well, company C didn't necessarily see the benefit, but you do. Like, there's so
Oh,
many different ways you can.
actually, that so again, another anecdote from my own life experience. Um, you remember when Sutton and I and Carl started Extreme Gaming, the gaming cafe?
Yeah.
So I didn't originally start there as an employee. It was just basically like, we need somebody to install the network because they
Yeah.
had a space, and
And you subcontracted me to help with that.
yes, yep, exactly, yep. And see, that's the beauty of all that. It's like, you make some extra money, I get some help, it all works out. But so, okay, so
I
Carl,
learned something.
yeah. And so now you have an additional skill that you can use, another tool in your toolbox, so to speak. But I remember, so Carl's like, well, we need all these network ports installed in this location and stuff. And I looked at it and figured like how much cabling and stuff. And I said, well, I could probably, as a discount, I could probably charge you about $1,200. Because like the wire on its own was really expensive. I mean, Cat5 cable, kind of pricey for the amount that was needed. And all the jacks and ports, wall plates and things like that. And he was like, oh, God, that's a lot of money. Well, I'm going to go ask around. And so he did. And like a couple days later, I get a call from Sutton. And he's like, okay, well, you're on. And I said, well, what happened? And he's like, well, Carl called a bunch of companies and they quoted like 2 or 3 times more than you did.
Like, that's where you should have been like, well, now my price is $2,400.
And there's where you have that leverage, because like, oh yeah, if you work in the industry, you kind of get a feel for what a thing costs or what people are charging for a thing. And that, but you can still make a ton of money even while undercutting the competition. And
people absolutely should do that. They should be like, if somebody says, oh, you're not worth that, and then comes back to you later and be like, okay, you are worth that, be like, sorry, now I'm more expensive. Teach them a lesson in like seeing a deal when they can grab it, like.
And that's coming from the standpoint of unknown, like nobody knows who you are. But if you are good, you can build up a reputation where people will actually pay you more just because it's you. Look at Louis Vuitton and Prada and stuff. Why do people pay that much for purses and stuff?
I have no idea.
I don't understand that. Like, come on, it's a fucking purse.
Yeah, like some of their stuff too. Like, I went to Dusseldorf a year ago and looked at some of the like Louis Vuitton places, and they have the most ridiculous outfits on their mannequins. And then there was like a lamp with tits and like all kinds of weird shit.
I know. But that's the thing. It's like you build up a reputation. And so maybe that's the goal too. You could chart. The thing is, you could do the bare minimum and undercut somebody. Like, hey, I could have installed all that cabling and, it would be functional. But maybe I'm a whiz kid and I'm able to command a higher amount of money because I do a very good job. Not only is it like a proper installation, but it's also beautiful to look at, to the point where people are like, wow, look at that wiring. It's freaking cool. Like, that's one example, but there's so many possibilities there that, like, it isn't just the work you do, it's how you do it. And oh man, I don't know. I think this is a shift that needs to happen. Because honestly, really like what I do could be an on-call sort of situation. Because most of the time there isn't a lot of stuff going on. It's like little tiny things. So it's like, I could just be sitting at home all day long with my phone on me, and I've got my remote desktop system set up. And
I would encourage you then to kind of sit and think, like, what would I need to charge as an on-call, like consultant or contractor for the very same work,
mhm,
and then propose it to them and be like, here's what I would like, because I know you don't personally value things like health insurance and stuff. So
mhm.
you could actually save them money and make more money potentially
Yeah,
for yourself
per
and have more
hour.
time.
Well, yeah, exactly, because like they're just paying me to be there when this is this cultural shift again that it comes back to this from the corporate standpoint. They need to start, because well, when you have corporations in particular where there's shareholders and all that stuff, um, the bottom line is the big deal. So if you could like cut that in half, wouldn't that be great?
Yeah.
Like, oh, you'd have basically the same amount of work being done, but it would cost you half as much. Like, that's awesome. And from
Yeah.
an employee standpoint, it's great because, like, well, you don't have to work that much there. It gives you opportunities. You could use that time to just be for leisure or creativity, or you could use that time to do some other work, go do some other things in the off time and stuff like that. And
Yeah.
like that's a good life, honestly. That people, this concept of having a career is dumb. It's so
Right.
stupid. It's destructive, and it's so antiquated. We need to
And it
go.
defines people, and when it
Yes.
shouldn't be. It really
Yeah.
shouldn't.
Mm-hmm.
Um, like there's plenty of people saying you're not your job,
Mm-hmm.
but in reality you kind of are. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and it's even like a topic of conversation, like, oh, what do you do for a living?
Uh-huh.
Like it matters to people for some reason. And
Yeah.
none of that makes sense. Like that isn't, to kind of circle around to the initial question, to me is not quality of life. To define yourself based on what you can do for others, like in a sheerly in the capacity of providing for your own livelihood.
Well,
You know?
from a financial standpoint, shall
Yeah,
we say?
yeah. Like if what you can do for others is artistic or you actually take pride in it or whatever, like yeah, be known for that. But
Mm-hmm.
like when it comes to like what you do as a job, like, oh well, I'm very passionate about checking books out to people, or like maybe some people are, but other people might just think that's okay, that's a job, like
Mm-hmm.
that's something I do to pay the bills. But some people might be LeVar Burton, like
Yeah, yeah.
and
Well, and this
like
is
it
something.
it shouldn't be the defining factor.
It shouldn't, and it isn't for me. And usually, you're saying, "What do you do for a living?" is a common question. I very rarely ask that unless it like there's something super interesting, like if somebody
Mhm.
is an astronaut or something. Like, okay, well,
Yeah.
that's a conversation I would love to have. Um, but I usually ask people, "What are your hobbies? What do you like to do for fun?"
Mhm.
That's what I'm interested in. Like, because that to me defines who you are. Whatever you do in your off time, in your leisure time, the time when you don't have to do anything, but you want to do something. What is it you do? That is much more important. And sometimes that can make you money. Like, you could be there, if you love working and tinkering with cars and stuff like that. Yeah, doing car repairs, that can make you a ton of money. It's just kind of like fortunate that you also enjoy doing that. Like
Right.
me, I enjoy problem solving. Um, that that's so satisfying. And
Yeah.
oh my god,
I'm
like
in that boat too. Like, uh, a lot of the analogical thinking that comes from having a broad variety of experiences is that problem solving comes a little bit more naturally.
mm-hmm.
Um, just because it it often requires thinking outside the box, which
Yeah, like 4D
which
logic.
I don't want to say it's impossible without broad experience, but it's certainly much easier when you have broad experience.
It comes much more effortlessly. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and that's the thing. It's like where I work, I constantly am bringing up these things, concerns about a particular thing that nobody even thought of. And these are people with certifications and degrees and all kind like master's degrees and stuff, and they hadn't even considered that a particular thing would be possible or a potential hang up or something like that. And that's mostly because I've done everything. Like it's like I've seen it all, man. I'm not really surprised. And so it's like, when you're analyzing a problem and trying to find a solution, you have so many avenues that you can mentally explore versus somebody who's very narrow in their focus and they're only seeing the stuff that they were schooled in. And so it's like, like for IT, for instance, if you worked in a restaurant, that experience could actually be valuable in an IT context, even if it's not like directly connected to technology, but it's like you may be able to conjure up things in ways that
I was just about to say, like I've used, I've sat in on weekly research meetings in the lab I worked in some years ago, and used things from when I was a cook as kind of like the basis of an idea. Like maybe it has nothing to do directly with making a marinara sauce or something, but like the core elements or whatever thought processes you use for that skill can be applied. Like the synapses are still there, like so your brain flows like a river automatically in that way that other people aren't thinking in. So how is that not valuable?
I think it's far more valuable than most people are aware. And maybe this is like culturally speaking, it should be more encouraged and maybe almost be a prerequisite that before you go into a career, you dip your toes into a variety of different work environments, doing different things. And I would say, I don't think it should be like a government mandate necessarily, but it should be like a cultural requirement.
Well, okay.
You do the grand tour before you settle in.
Yeah.
You go and work in fast food for a few months, work in construction for a few months, work in an office for a few months or something. Do deliveries for a while. That kind of thing.
I will say, even though the work culture in Germany is very much like do one thing for the rest of your life, in school, they kind of have you go through different internships. In like you can't just do one thing. So they kind of tell you to dip your toes into a few different things and see where you want to go. I think that's a really good idea.
I absolutely agree. And I think that maybe even like say in the US, high school should be almost exclusively that. And not okay. And here's the caveat, because there's a huge pitfall here. You shouldn't be able to decide which things you try out. It's chosen randomly from a pool of things to try out. So because people because you know how it is. Remember a career week or career day in school, everybody's like, well, I want to be a firefighter, or I'm going to be a police officer, or I'm going to do this. It's like, no. Chances are you're going to be working at McDonald's for a while. Chances are you're going to be sitting in an office crunching numbers or something like that. The most boring, mundane job possible. So you can't have these lofty goals when you're young. Well, because people have these lofty goals when they're young, they're going to go into these wild directions that are implausible and probably not very likely. And so I think it would be awesome if for those 4 years you had to basically intern doing a whole bunch of different things that maybe you're unfamiliar with, maybe you don't want to do, maybe you're afraid of doing.
Yeah.
And because you might find one of those things you will excel at unexpectedly and be like, whoa, I never realized I wanted to be a janitor. This is actually pretty cool, or something like that. Because there's a job for everybody.
Yeah.
And didn't Star Trek, oh, this is going into Star Trek as usual. Wasn't there a TNG episode where there was like a planet where I guess a computer, like this big giant supercomputer, managed everything and like would find the correct thing for a particular person to do, based on their skills, and help them hone those skills and
Wasn't that
bring
the
them out.
original series?
No, that was a TNG one. I remember it because there was a carving tool that was automatic, and it would like laser its way through and create a sculpture from somebody's mind. It was like a kid or something that was doing that. I think the computer was giving off a bunch of radiation or something like that. Maybe.
Oh yeah,
That was the sticky.
I mean,
wicket
like,
for that episode.
it is funny that high school, as it is now in the US, kind of does that, where they're like, based on this standard score and blah blah blah, and talking with you for 5 minutes, this is the kind of career that you could go into.
Mhm.
They have these like probabilities of what you'd be good at.
It was very wrong for me.
Yeah, you look back on it and it's like, what?
Oh, well, and that's where I think being random has the best possibility for success. Because it'll introduce people to things they wouldn't have even considered. They might actually really enjoy, like working with your hands. Maybe somebody doesn't realize that they're really good at it and they really love it. And that is one of the, from a societal standpoint, from a civilization standpoint, working with your hands is kind of one of the most critical things. Like micro, dirty jobs. I love that show, and I love his attitude about things, and kind of highlighting how important even these things that somebody working in sewers and stuff. It's like, yeah, nobody would want to do that, right? But it's super critical. Like if somebody doesn't do that, who's gonna do it? And it's actually like, so he kind of makes it almost kind of interesting, where you're almost kind of at the end of an episode thinking, maybe I might want to apply to work in sewer maintenance. That's actually kind of cool, you know? Like, okay, it's dirty, but it's like and that's something that we need more and more of that, I think. And this is where the contracting, freelancing sort of thing comes in, that people who are flexible, adaptable, you like, I'm not worried. I always joke, because of how all the stuff that I know at my job is like not something you learn in school. It's all tribal knowledge. So I always joke, like, what are they going to do? Fire me? Like, okay, I'll just come back as a contractor then for twice the pay, because like they'd be lost if I quit or were fired. Like, but that comfort too. It's like, I know that if I lost my job right now, there are hundreds of things I could do, all kinds of things. I could apply. Most jobs that I've applied for, like, I'm like, okay, I need a job. I fill out an application, do an interview, boom, get the job. Like I just select a job and I get a job. I even got a job working at Kit's Cameras. I remember going in there and I got an application, and I talked to the manager, and he's like, well, we don't really, we're kind of full right now. We don't really need any people. And I'm like, well, just read my application and maybe we'll do an interview. And so that happened. We did an interview and I got hired. So like they didn't even want to hire me in the beginning, but they still did.
Yeah. It's funny. Like my last job, I got laid off a year and a half ago, and the, I had built a sort of groove for myself where like I was more or less like beta testing a new program for them. They put all their chips on it and shifted their entire like uh, methodology into this new program, and so I had to like kind of learn it, and it was proprietary modular sort of software, and of course after I was laid off, like they had to keep contacting me, and it was like uh
You're
I
like,
mean,
it'll cost you.
sounds like you still need me, like
Yeah, exactly. Well, and that's important too. In your job, you should make yourself indispensable,
hmm
and then also be like I was saying, having a lot of tools in your toolbox is sort of a safety net where you always have a fallback. So no matter what, you can go like, okay, well, I guess I'm out of work right now, but you always have stuff to do. Whereas if you have chosen one particular path, let's say you got a degree in psychology and you want to be a counselor, right? And that's all you've ever done. And that's the only skill set you have, apart from maybe your hobbies, whatever they might be. Um, well, if you lose your job as a counselor for some reason, well, you have to find another counselor job or something similar. Whereas if you have a broad variety of experiences and skill sets, like, yeah, I could lose my job in IT today and I can go work as a, like, working for a general contractor, building stuff. Like, I know how to do that. I could
mm.
go work for an auto shop because I can pretty much do anything when it comes to fixing cars. Um, like, there's a whole bunch of different things. I could do interior decorating because I have an eye for that kind of thing. You know, like I could do customer service because I have a lot of customer service experience, and I guess I'm good with people in that regard. Like, so it's like there's really no fear of losing a job because there's so many possible things I could do.
My goal now is to craft a resume that just refers people to a number of our episodes and be like, look, this is my thinking, and
Mhm.
like you can watch my thought process and like how I come up with these ideas off the cuff, and
When the
like
entirety of your resume is nothing but a QR code linking to your YouTube channel.
why
Oh
not?
man. Yeah.
Like I kind of did that with online dating. I
Mhm.
was like, and of course that kind of backfired, but overall it was like helpful to a lot of people. Like a lot of people thought it was really cool and really unique, and they'd never seen that before. But I basically said, hey, if you don't want to, like risk wasting time with me going on a date, just watch an episode and see how I interact with one of my best friends, and
Yeah.
you'll basically get a gist of who I am.
That's
And
actually, yeah, it's a really good idea. Yeah.
like it, yeah, I mean, it is honest, and
And it's good for you too, because if there's somebody whose personality would clash with yours, you don't
mhm,
want that. Like,
yeah,
yeah,
like if they're watching the episode and they're like, "Oh, this guy's full of shit," like they
what an asshole.
don't want to go on a date with me.
Yeah. But see, then nobody's wasting any time on that.
Exactly.
Yeah, and maybe
So,
we might end up with another subscriber.
mhm.
Or at least somebody that shit posts in the comments, which is fine. Go ahead and do that. Like, it's all right.
I think I did get a number of subscribers, but they probably all dropped off at some point.
That's all right.
Wait, he's married now? Oh, unsubscribe.
Well, in my realm, that doesn't matter. Oh man. Yeah, that I like, man, this has taken quite the meandering path. But
Well, yeah. So yeah, we started talking about like having time to yourself,
mhm.
equating to quality of life, and it sort of culminated in like maximizing your work life.
And the control you have over it, that's really the critical
Yeah.
thing. Because okay, so here's the thing, and maybe no one's ever going to hear this, but one thing I've learned through my journeys over the decades is that money is irrelevant. Um, you can always make money. It's just a number. It really doesn't matter. Um, what matters is time. You can never get back that time. You need to appreciate your life enough to demand from the world around you that you're compensated for the expenditure of your time for somebody else's benefit.
Yeah.
Like if you want to do something for yourself, yeah, whatever, knock yourself out. Humans have been doing that as long as humans, before humans have existed. Really, I mean, pre-humans have done that. But you can't get back that time, and we need to consider our goals and what we're working for, what we're doing, why, what are we, what's the trajectory that we're like. It can't simply be getting a paycheck. It needs to be more than that. And we need to consider the fact that our lives are finite. We're only here for so long. So it's like every hour of every day is super important. We should appreciate it and value that and treasure that. And this is where taking time to, I guess, smell the roses essentially comes into play. That like, hey, we need, yes, humans are remarkable machines. We can do fantastic things, almost miraculous things. But we have to take time to just be, to just consider the world around us, just appreciate things, take in the beauty of things and relax a little bit, be with ourselves in silence and contemplation. And that's where if you're always working to make more money, things, more material stuff. I'm one to talk. But like taking that time to really be with yourself and be with the cosmos, be with nature, whatever. Do something remarkable for the sake of doing something remarkable. Like create art or something, build something. I don't know, whatever it is, but this is where having that time off is really important. Like for me, I can't just switch modes from work to leisure necessarily. Well, okay, with enough beer I can, but then I start losing the ability to actually connect with some of that stuff. But it's really important that we have that time, and really live in the moment and appreciate our lives. And all the things that you've worked for and purchased and surround yourself with, like what's the point of having any of that if you don't have the time to really appreciate it?
Yeah.
Like, so yeah, we it's a culture thing.
Right.
We need to change that. It has to change. And I think going to a more freelance kind of way of life, like a laissez-faire work culture, would benefit not only the companies but the employees. Everybody would win in that regard. Yeah, I don't know. What do you think? I always wax philosophical at the end of these.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with that. Ever since I've been laid off and trying to learn a new language and then find a job in that language and stuff, it's becoming evident to me that like I'm not bored.
Mm-hmm.
I fill my day with like regular household stuff, which is the normal level of exhausting, but not like debilitatingly so, the way it is when you have a full-time job and you're like, oh, I wish I could write music, but I don't have time. Well, I do have time. So like I can spend time working on back-end show stuff and writing some music and taking care of the household stuff and learning German and it's at my own pace, like it's not stressful. And I mean, at some point, like, yeah, you need money, but
Yeah. And
um,
stress is obviously going to be present at one point or another,
yeah,
but not
but
like
like finding the
not
balance
this is the
is
thing.
important.
Like, so y- your level of stress would be more uh, momentary or circumstantial, whereas a lot of people who work all the time, all around the world, they have like an existential
Yeah,
stress where there's an ever present stress level all the time of like that. That's the thing. And
yeah.
that doesn't benefit any. How does it help you being stressed out just living? Like, and
I remember that stress. Like I
mm-hmm,
remember being like, like I'm really not cut out for the full time Monday through Friday 9 to 5 sort of job, and I don't think anybody is
no, they're not.
actually, quite
No, they're not.
honestly.
And that's evident when you look at other cultures that don't have the
Yeah,
same kind of structures that we have. They don't have like necessarily a schedule. Um,
hmm,
they just do the work when it's needed and where it's needed and stuff.
yeah,
And that can present its own level of stress, but can also present its own level of leisure and downtime.
yeah,
Yeah. Well, so there's that saying, do something once every day that scares you. And what you did, moving to Germany, um, basically at the drop of a hat, like it isn't like
yeah.
you didn't like plan for years and spend all this time preparing and everything. Like that would be terrifying to most people. And I
Just
have another
literally
friend.
because I got laid off.
Yeah.
I was like, well, I mean, how am I going to pay my rent now? And
Mm-hmm.
then if I go find a different place, for cheaper, which is basically impossible,
Uh-huh.
then I'm signing a lease and I don't have a job and blah, blah, blah. And like, why would I want to start a new job when I wanted to move here anyway? So I was just like, okay, well, I'll just move within a month and
Yeah.
made it happen. Yeah.
Which is that I've done a lot of similar things like that. And
Hmm.
the thing is, turns out in the end, oftentimes all those fears are totally unfounded.
Yeah.
Because human minds love to craft all kinds of terrifying possibilities, like the what ifs, like, oh my God, it's going to be this or this could happen and that can happen. And yeah, well, in the end of the day, none of that happens. And you find that it actually wasn't so bad after all. Like, you're over there in Germany and you're doing okay, and probably better than you would be if you were still living in the US. Uh,
Yeah.
and yeah, but see, you're a budding freelancer in that regard, but a global freelancer.
Right. Yeah. I mean, like that highlights another aspect of the whole quality of life thing, and that's just like when there's a window of opportunity, like whatever it might be, just kind of go for it. Like
Mhm.
it might be high stakes, of course. Like I I had to sacrifice a lot. Like I missed a fair chunk of time at the end of my parents' lives. But I also made it like at the same time, I made a concerted effort to make what time I had with them really count.
Mhm.
So I kind of wonder if I made the most of it rather than if I had dragged it out for a long time, and then
Yeah,
said
because
like, oh, you know what, I'll see them tomorrow or whatever, and then there is no tomorrow. Like sometimes when you just go for something, stick to it and say whatever I have to do to get this done. It might be stressful right now, but like once I'm there, I can just coast. And that's kind of what happened. Like it was a huge stress. There was a lot of cost involved. Um, I'm incredibly lucky to have had things fall into place the way they did when they did in
Mhm.
order to facilitate that. Had I done anything differently, it wouldn't have happened, you know?
Oh man,
And
butterfly effect though. We could
yeah,
that's a whole different thing. Well, yeah, actually that sort of mindset, if humans didn't grab a hold of that, well, all of human civilization would still be clustered around the Euphrates River. you know,
right.
like
Yeah,
explorers, the Vikings, right? That kind of thing. Like,
yeah,
why did they do that? Because why not? Why did humans cross the land bridge into the U.S. all those years ago? I don't know. Because well, let's see what's out there.
yeah.
You
I
know.
mean, I've never surfed, but I would imagine that the analogy of surfing is applicable because you can say like, the perfect wave may never come when you're out there.
Mm-hmm.
So if you just see that opportunity and get up on your board and ride the wave, like that's your shot, like that might be
Mm-hmm.
the one wave you get today or your whole life.
Yeah, yeah. That's oh man, that's deep. Well, and that, oh, dude, that's really deep.
Yeah.
Well, because so many people spin their wheels for their entire lives, saying, "Oh, if only." I'm
Yeah.
just waiting for the right moment. Like people, well, we can use dating as an example. They're like, "Oh, I'm looking for the one." Well, how
Right.
about just anyone? Start somewhere, you
Yeah. But I
know.
mean, like if you should also like think maybe there's a genuine chance that that could be the one. You shouldn't just settle for anything. It should be a real shot at something, like,
Sure, but you're never going to find that if you don't try.
right.
Like if your expectations are set to a particular threshold that's so improbable and
Yeah.
so unlikely, like
Like with the
you're
surfing analogy, if you see a little like 12cc motor boat go by, shouldn't be like, that's the wave I need to get, you know?
Mhm. Yeah, yeah,
Like, no,
exactly.
that's probably not going to carry you so far,
Mhm.
you know?
Well, yeah, and,
Um,
and obviously don't set your bar so low,
mhm.
but that's kind of I guess it how to how to describe what I'm thinking. I,
For some reason, when you said set the bar low, I had this pop in my head. They got a pepper bar.
oh my god. Yeah, the Quiznos ad with the little dead animals. Like, oh my god. Well, it's important that we at least have standards, right, in some
Mm,
form or another. But we also shouldn't only occupy the space above our standard threshold.
right.
Like it's like part of life experience is all the in betweens, all the sometimes mundane or drudgery filled things that like oh, well, that's part of life. um it's also important, I think, to explore from a career standpoint, from a job standpoint, try a bunch of different things. And from an employer standpoint, it's also, I think, a big deal for them to not judge somebody for having too many different paths,
Hmm.
because the people who have had a lot of paths are the most interesting and capable people I know.
Well,
Um,
yeah, I would argue that every company should have at least one contractor who has a variety of world experience and maybe even beneficial if they have no experience whatsoever in that field.
mhm,
Because sometimes you need to look at something, of course, they'll need a learning curve, right? Like they need to spend some time in the environment, see what it is your company does, blah, blah, blah. But that's all going to be worth it in the long run, almost a guarantee, because like they're going to have a fresh perspective
mhm.
that's going to guide, uh, like incalculable returns for you.
and,
Like,
and in the world of invention, that that plays out. Like
Yeah.
a lot of the most remarkable inventions came from people who didn't have any formal training in the field in which that invention emerged from.
Right.
Like,
Well, like the laboratory I was mentioning earlier, one of the research meetings I was in, uh, we had a brand new vice president of research and development, and he said, "You know what? I'm open to listen to anybody's ideas," and I immediately jumped on that. And in my lunch break, I researched and found something that I thought could be applicable in our field of research, drafted up a PowerPoint presentation in my lunch break and gave it to him. And they took it through a provisional patent application. And I was on that patent application with a bachelor's degree. That's never heard of. Like, you have to have a doctorate basically to end up on a patent. And there I was, like, totally green with just like the some core knowledge and outside the box thinking. That's it.
And that's really either like you have a diversity of experience or you're from a different field. That's how you get outside the box thinking.
Yeah.
Because
like you can have enough knowledge to be dangerous, as the saying goes, right?
Yeah.
Like, you know enough to know like how things work, but maybe not to be able to predict how well they'll work. But sometimes that's enough to gamble on something, to say, you know what, that might actually work,
Yeah.
and
Actually, it's sort of a Dunning-Kruger effect kind of thing.
yeah, it is, yeah.
Like, so,
But
maybe
knowing how dumb you are is also important. Like,
yes, well, yeah, we should always be humble.
Yeah.
But sometimes it like it's the maybe not quite the 1,000 monkeys banging on typewriters kind of thing. But sometimes people who like you kind of pigeonhole yourself when you focus on one particular thing and all your academic experience is like a laser essentially. Well, you know how that is. So having the kind of random sort of ideas that come from not really knowing what you're doing. That's how I've lived my life that way. Actually, you can accomplish stuff that, well, problems that like have been around for thousands or hundreds or thousands of years, have been solved by total idiots just by accident, essentially. Like, oh yeah, wait a minute, huh? And so there's value in that. Man, this is going in a totally different direction. Talking about experts and things like that.
Yeah, like sometimes like thinking differently can change how you do like even the most mundane things, but it can feel like such a revelation, I guess. For instance, cereal boxes, when you close your cereal box, they've got those two little flaps on the side, and then the one where you can like button the other one into, right?
Which never stays put.
Yeah. You know why that is?
Huh.
Have you ever tried folding the big one down, then the little flaps over it, and then tuck it in? The little flaps provide more structural integrity to the corners so that it squeezes together.
So it's like providing pressure.
Yeah. I just like randomly discovered that on my own a few weeks ago, and I'm like, oh shit, I can keep my cereal fresh now.
I wonder how many millions of people,
like, why couldn't they just put that on the box? Like,
you would
hold
think
it this way and then that way,
just have
and it'll
numbers.
stay closed,
Just have numbers like 1, 2, 3, 4, right?
Yeah.
There you go. Huh.
But it's stuff like that, like it might be obvious to some people, but others like us go 40 plus years of doing cereal wrong.
And the interesting thing is the engineer who developed that box structure probably just figured everybody would know how to do it,
Right.
and never thought
They're
like,
oh, this is simple physics.
Yeah, we can just do that way. And it worked, of
Mhm.
course, but then they disseminated it amongst the public.
Well, okay, so the reason everybody does it the wrong way is because it's packaged the wrong way. When they, glue it together, they do it with the small flaps down and then the big one and the other big one, and they glue it.
Yeah.
And so people unfold it that way and they think, oh, that's the way I have to put it back. Well, no,
Yeah.
you're wrong.
Yeah, that
we've all been wrong.
Well, and that goes back to UI design, which I'm like really big on. Like, it should be intuitive. And what you're saying right there, that's the intuitive sort of like, oh, we'll just reverse the process.
Yeah.
So because they presented it the wrong way, people reverse it the wrong way, and there you go. And that's why the box always pops open and gets stale. So you either glue it with the small flaps in the correct orientation to give people a clue to how it's supposed to go together, or you label it in a way that indicates to people how it should go together. I'm of the camp, like the pictorial camp. Like it should, nothing should require an understanding of language to know how to use. Like, if you built a proper UI, you shouldn't have to, like, I could go from here with my absolute tiny understanding of Japanese. I can count to 5. That's about all I can say yes and no. I should be able to go to Japan and operate anything public facing in Japan without any issue, and vice versa. They should be able to come here and use the stuff here without confusion or error.
Have you tried building anything from IKEA?
It's an exercise in, well, let's say I dig deep into my catalog of curse words.
Yeah, the pictures have to be good.
Yeah. Well, actually, it's kind of funny. Speaking of that, like, I'm very fond of the non-Lego kits, the brick building kits. And me and partners and stuff, we've built quite a few of them. And it's funny how, like, the instructions are for a lot of them. Mold King in particular is really, really good in this regard. No language, just pictures. And it's very clear which piece you need and where it goes. They even have like a little like 1-to-1 where you can like stick the thing down on the instructions and compare its size, or you can count if you want to count how many bumps, that kind of thing. They're so well done. It like, very rarely have I gotten confused, and man, that's good. I'm sure Lego does that too, but I don't know, because I haven't bought a Lego kit in a long time because they're too damn expensive.
Yeah, it's not Lego, but it's sort of related. It's a Playmobil. I bought a little Playmobil Ninja.
That's awesome. That's something, speaking to quality of life, actually. Man, this has gone on quite a while, but I think we're still touching on a lot of good points. But speaking to quality of life, you have to take time out to play. Everybody should. Like, one of my coworkers, the one who's going into a different position, like, we always talk about, like, never grow up. Yeah, I haven't. I still have to. I have a whole. I have dolls, Monster High dolls, like, all over the place. I have Legos. I have toys. Like, I play games all the time. Like, it's important to never lose that childlike mind, that fascination, that innocence and curiosity.
Yeah.
Like that adds to quality of life so much.
It's the quality of my bladder I'm worried about.
It's the quality of your chair that I'm worried about.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think I'm sure we'll have some other expansions on this at some point, but
Yeah.
for now, I think we'll call it a day or night. I mean, it's day here, it's night there.
Yeah. Yeah. The philosophy ones are always pretty deep and long running, but as
Some of the
usual,
best.
like all the life hacks are right here at the end.
Yep. Oh
Now
yeah.
you know how to keep your cereal fresh. And what more quality of life can you ask for than fresh cereal?
That's a good point. Oh, wait a minute. Okay, one last thing. Are you a milk first or milk second person?
Second.
Me too.
Yeah.
I don't understand those chuckle fucks that pour milk into a bowl and then the cereal afterwards. Like, what the hell?
They're probably British. They're all like, let's
Probably.
put the milk in and then the tea. Like,
Yeah, but it's like, you can't calculate how much milk you need
right.
when there's no cereal. Like like I've always put the cereal in, like this is how much cereal I'm gonna eat, and then I pour the milk in until it kind of co-mingles with the cereal and it starts floating a little bit. Like,
Yeah.
okay, that's perfect. But like,
And then a little extra because it will absorb a little bit too.
yep. Okay, well, the best thing when you have like sugared cereal, like the good cereals of the 80s and 90s, the best thing is once you finish the cereal, drinking that sweet, brightly colored milk. Oh man.
See, with me, the sweet spot is there shouldn't be any milk left at the end, but it shouldn't be like all crispy crunchy the whole time. Like it needs to sog up a little bit.
Yeah. It's like a perfect balance to get it just right. Oh man.
Sog factor.
Well, that's actually kind of that's sort of like an allegory for what we were talking about here.
Yeah.
In a way.
Yeah.
Cereal.
What a good way to sum it up.
Yeah.
Perfect amount of sogginess to your cereal is the key to quality of life.